Hi, everybody. He's going to make an announcement in the room and try to get the people, the stragglers over here. So, but in the meantime, this is going to be like the special bonus material that's not officially part of it. Yes. How many people have heard us yak before? So we shouldn't tell those stories anymore, right? You've heard all that stuff.
We should do lecture bloopers now.
Yeah. That's what we normally do, Dave. Just want to introduce everybody to Mike Breen. This is the first time he's ever been at one of these things. Mike Breen programmed the game Buzz Bombers. And I'll tell you a little story about Buzz Bombers. What we're going to try to do is, there's questions that have come up before and everything, and so we actually have made a list of these questions, and we're going to try to do kind of a standardized thing to kind of move things along here. John Sohl here yet?
No, but you can start.
He's out playing.
Okay, so I just want to tell a quick, or have maybe Mike can tell it, just kind of a little thing. It's because it's not on the list here since he's here. We're waiting for the announcement down there. And that is that Mike's game is a one-player game. And they made, I don't know how many of them, 5,000 usually was a run, or maybe 10,000. You don't have any idea how many they made initially? The first run?
The initial run was like 10,000, I think.
Yeah. In the initial run, the box says for 1 or 2 players. So Mike, what did they do?
So they had me sit in an office with a little magic marker and mark out on the boxes that it was a 2-player game.
Mike, did they have you do that?
No, they didn't. But they asked me, but I told them no.
But they did actually do that on the shrink wrap. They were already in boxes in shrink wrap. Were you the one who had to break it to market? It was not a 2-player game?
No.
Somebody just discovered it.
I think the Mark. Urbanic.
Oh, Urbanic did? His boss, Mark Urbanic, goes, wait a minute! You know, that's after how many it's not a 1 or 2-player game. So,
It might have been after that that they institutionalized something where you had to sign off on the box art. They routed in the programmer had to sign off on it, at which time I made a correction to my box art sarcastically because they didn't really understand the game, and I threw in the sarcastic comment in the comments, and then the box got published with the sarcastic comments.
yes, if you look at the Mind Strike box, it actually says, howl with delight. As you call the computer Max and Gus or whatever.
Actually, at that time, it was when I became in charge of reviewing all the documentation. And from then on, for every game that got released, I had to go to marketing and review all the documentation.
Our joke at the time was because when his game came out, it was just after there had been a big upheaval at Mattel, and the president of the company, Josh Denham, had been retired, and a new president, Mac Morris, had been brought in. But they had given Josh Denham an office to kind of do his sending out resumes from, so he could still supposedly say he was on staff there. And we said that's probably what he was doing in the office over there was the magic marker. He was the one who was marking off the or two. Okay, I think we're all here now, so let me see. Down at the end, I believe we have Mr. John Sohl. John, I believe, was the first programmer hired by Mattel specifically as an Intellivision programmer. The first games were done by an outside consulting firm, APH Consulting. Then Mattel started taking some of their handheld people like Mike Minkoff and Ray Kestner to develop games. But I think, John, you were the first one actually hired as an Intellivision programmer, correct?
Yes and no. I was newly hired, and the choice was either to go into handhelds or television, and I wanted to do a television, so I did that.
So in other words, yes, I was correct. Next, who do we have? Is Michele next?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Michele Mock. Now Michele was hired. Really, we had, you know how we had like the entertainment computer system, the IntelliVoice, and all these other weird things. And she was going to be doing a game for that system, but that system then lost favor and was cut way back on. So she never actually got a game released because of that. So, but you know, they're so terrible. So let's recognize Ms. Michele Mock. I mean, she showed up. She was a programmer. She was real. Next to her, Karen Nugent, an artist, graphic designer, most famous for translating the graphics for Burger Time. So she is, if you like the name Burger Time, you like her graphics. Mike Breen next to her, we already introduced him. Now there's Bill Fisher next to him. Bill Fisher, one of the early programs. What? I said, we talked about Mike. Next, Bill Fisher. Bill was brought in, usually we got a little training project to work on at the beginning, just so you can kind of learn how the machine worked. Bill was given the code that John had done for his game Astro Smash, because originally there were two games, one of which was kind of Asteroids-like, and the other one was a game you're familiar with Astro Smash. And the lawyers decided, with some convincing from Atari, that the Asteroids game was only 2 asteroids. So as a training project, they gave that code to Bill and said, can you do something that's like this, but not like this? Wink, wink. And that's how Space Hawk came about, which is a training project, but was also a game that got released.
Yeah,
and
my job was make not asteroids.
And then he went on to work with Steve on Space Spartans, and then he and Steve after that worked with John Sohl on B-17 Bomber. So Bill's and then in management, Bill was put in charge of developing our games that we did for the PC and for Apple II, and the PC Junior. Who remembers the PC Junior?
Oh, yeah.
This is the only room in the world where that response. At IBM, you would not get that response.
That is seriously awesome.
Jumping over here, then we have Mr. David Warhol, and a programmer and also a musician extraordinaire. If you've played the game Thunder Castle, and all the musical classical themes are in that. That was all arranged by Dave. And if you know anything about the Intellivision with the three channels of sound, the magnificent sound. You look at some of the early Intellivision games where you have and then you hear some stuff that Dave did. It's just absolutely incredible. But it's also fantastic just in terms of game design. His game, Mind Strike, fantastic original game. He worked with Connie on Thunder Castle, and then after Mattel, he went on to produce almost all the games that were released by IMTV Corporation. So first finishing a lot of the games that Mattel done, like Hover Force and Diner, which had started out as He-Man Masters of the Universe Part 2, and then Commando and new educational games and all sorts of things. About 20 games. I think it was 21 games that he produced for IMTV Corporation. Next to him is Steve Roney. Like I say, Steve worked on B-17 Bomber, worked on Space Spartans, and then he did the kind of an experimental thing. Remember the Aquarius computer? So there's fewer hands, there's still some. He did the game Utopia, which was some hack game, some program I did earlier, but he took it over. And translated it for the Aquarius, which was an experimental thing, because all of our programming was always done in assembly language, because you had to make every single byte or decal count. And the experiment with Aquarius version of Utopia was there was this new programming language called C, and the question was, this is supposed to be very efficient and that almost as efficient as assembly language programming. So that was one of the first games, one of the only games, because we went out of business shortly thereafter, that was actually programmed in a higher level language. And I think he got about like 80% efficiency, but then he went in and coded by hand and fixed up the assembled, the compiled code to something even more efficient. And it's very. Didn't somebody come up yesterday and say, boy, Aquarius Utopia was their favorite retro game? One person said they actually liked that game. That was the one person who bought it. Anyway, next to him is Mr. Don Daglow, who is the man who did Utopia. And it wasn't some hack. That was just a joke. And Don has the distinction of being the person who interviewed me when I came to Mattel, so he's responsible for all things that happened since. Yes, you are. Anyways, shortly after he did Utopia, his next project was going to be Tron Solar Sailor, and he started working on that, but then was promoted to director. We had 2 directors of the television program. It was Don and it was Mike Minkoff. And so Tron Solar Sailor fell to me too. So that was my game, but it was started by Don, as he no longer had the time to be a programmer.
The truth
Think of all the wonderful games that would have come out had he stayed a programmer.
the truth is, they said, we want to promote you, but you must stop programming. True story.
Anyway, so what we're going to try to do to kind of, because we have a big panel and we need to speed things along, we put together some questions. They're sort of based on some of the questions we always get from people, and also some that just kind of we wanted to answer ourselves and we didn't know who asked us. So, so I just want to start down at the beginning, down there with John, and ask these questions, okay?
And the answers are like designed to be 30 seconds or less.
Right. What is your favorite color? No.
Soundbites.
Okay. So, John.
Yes.
Question number one. How did you learn about the job that Mattel was programming video games? Because you got to remember, that was not a job description, 3 or 4 years before we started. So how did you learn about the job?
Short story. I had seen in a job advertisement for Mattel several months earlier, and I had not applied for it. It wasn't a programmer specifically, but I was unemployed, and I read an article in the LA Times about Smith Engineering, which was doing game work and contract thing. And I was so impressed by the article, I went down there to apply for a job. And they said, oh, you're only a 100th person today who responded to the article with a resume. So I recalled the advertisement from Mattel. In those days, we had things called newspapers, and they had things called one ads for jobs. That's how you found out about them. Is this microphone working? Well, all right.
Your booming voices.
Okay, I'm just worried about posterity, you know. So I called up Mattel and hired him, and Mike Minkoff came in and interviewed me, and he basically went back, told me later, that he said, we should hire this guy. We don't know what we want him for, but he'd be an asset to the group, which then was called Design and Development. And so that was it. Ad in the paper.
Ad in the paper. Okay, John, question number two. What is your favorite Intellivision game and why? No, I think we'll do each person, I think, kind of get on the roll. So, John, what is your favorite Intellivision game and why?
Has to be Astro Smash, and why is because it takes seconds to learn and years to master, and it doesn't require any thinking, planning, or anything else. It's all very violent and simple-minded. Yet it's addictive, and I don't know why it's still around. I mean, I know why. It was a good game, but why it came out so good, that I don't know.
But it's also one of your favorite games. It's also your favorite game because you wrote it, right?
Well, it gives me a pride of authorship.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, if I want to kill an hour with the television, that's probably the first one I choose.
Okay, now, this is an interesting question. I think Steve came up with it. What would you like to do on the Intellivision? What game would you like to program on the Intellivision, but you weren't able to do it either because we didn't have the license to do it or because the technology wasn't quite there? What would you like to have seen? What would you like to have tried to work on?
Oh, you're asking me again?
Yeah.
I was pretty happy with what I worked on. I did later, I tried to do a flight simulator game on television, and that was very difficult because I was writing arctangent subroutines, 24-bit arctangent or cosine. I didn't know what they were, but it was obvious after I worked on it for several months that this was utterly impossible. You can't do a flight simulator game on a system that only has 112 words of memory and 256 bytes of memory.
But you kind of did do a flight simulator game at B-17 Bomber.
Yeah, but
So you had that interest in it from the beginning.
yeah. This was going to be actually aerodynamically correct. So I had to first of all learn aerodynamics, and then I had to. Anyway, that's
B-17 Bomber is not aerodynamically correct.
Shocking but true.
It's very close to the original parameters of what a B-17 could do in terms of altitude and speed and those sorts of things. So that's correct, but it doesn't. I don't deal with things like angle of attack and stalls and angled incidents and setting your flaps and all that kind of stuff that go into flight simulator games. I'm talking too much. You should.
No, everyone's going to get a chance here. So next question, another question for you, John. Are you playing any games now? And if so, which ones?
Nope, I'm out of the game planning industry completely, and that's it.
Okay, and looking back, what do you know now that you didn't know back then about programming or games or anything like that?
Not just in the game area, or my whole life.
Oh, you make it philosophical. Let's go. Let's give these guys some information.
I can't think of anything I've learned in the last 30 years. I need to know I learned in kindergarten, as they say. About game programming, I guess, it's like in movies. William Goldman, the screenwriter, once said, in the movie business, nobody knows anything. And I think in the game business, nobody knows anything. You don't know what's going to be popular. You don't know what's going to sell. You don't know what's not going to sell. Put your heart into a project that you think is great, and other people will say it's boring, or so you just have. I think theoretically you have to go. But this is possible nowadays. You have to go with what you want, or what you feel is going to be good. Because if you try to make a game, they come in. One quick thing. The marketing department at Mattel would come in and say, we could really use a motocross game and a boxing game. And even I worked on motocross for a week. I went to do a point of view angle, which is really ambitious, but probably 10 or 15 people worked on motocross before they finally got it done. Now that was from an external specification. The marketing people were right, because 10 years later, every game in the arcade involved kung fu fighting, boxing, or flying or driving. So they knew what the audience wanted, but we couldn't deliver it on television very well.
Okay. Let's now go on to your left there. Michelle, how did you find out about the job?
Well, I was working at El Segundo, and I was looking for a job closer to home. And I went out for an interview for a programming job, and I didn't know who the company was or anything, but basically it was just a headhunter sent me out, and I went out for this interview. And then I was speaking with Don Daglow, and he goes on and on. He never tells me where this job is, and I told him, I'm trying to get a job closer to home and everything like that. He convinces me I really need to work for him. And then he says, and the good news, it's a quarter of a mile closer to where you're at. So that's how I learned about it.
And what was your favorite television game? Saw you playing Burger Time earlier.
Yeah, I don't do too well on those. My favorite one actually was Minotaur. What was the name that was finally released as?
Treasures of Torment.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Advanced Dungeons and Dragons Treasure of Torment. Actually, Advanced Dungeons and Dragons trademark, Treasure of Torment trademark cartridge. Legally.
When I was playing it, but the thing I liked about that, after I figured that you didn't have, or learned that you didn't have to rush through it, was that you could actually think your way through it and plan ahead and be ready for things. And that's what I liked about that, because the other ones I'm directionally challenged, I can't do them.
Michelle, I remember you were a big D&D person back then, weren't you?
Well, I learned to play at lunchtime there at Mattel, and that was fun.
With Bill Goodrich and some of the other guys there?
Yeah.
Okay, what would you have liked to do on Intellivision? What project really was your educational?
Yeah, educational games. Later on, maybe 10 years later, I was teaching computers, and people had started developing games that I would have liked to have seen, earlier on in the television.
And other than in the booth over there, are you playing any games now?
Does Facebook count?
Yes.
Oh, yeah. Well, I don't like the Zynga games because there's too many pop-ups, but Farmtown is like one of my favorites, and it's because you can interact with people, and I think that's really cool.
Okay, looking back now at the job, what do you know now, or what do you think you know now about Mattel or Intellivision that you didn't realize at the time?
Well, about the graphics and things, because I wasn't really a game designer type of a programmer, but what I ended up doing later when I was teaching elementary school, and I was using a lot of the techniques that we learned, or that I kind of figured out as I was doing graphics and things. I used them with kids, and I had them actually doing little walkie graphics and doing them for some Commodore games and things like that. And it was just a way of taking what I learned on the job and using it with kids. They loved it. Also teaching them binary. And when they were saying, things about bids being turned on and off and how that worked, it was fun for them. Fun for me.
Great. Karen Nugent, our artist. How did you find out about the job?
I just graduated from Long Beach State, and there was an ad for graphics designer. And actually I went in with Richard Chang and then left, and one of the employees, Brad Gately, told me about another job, and Don Lovely hired me. Thank you.
Richard Chang was head of Mattel's design and development department, and he was really the first one who saw what Atari was doing with the 2600 and said, Mattel should have one of those. And so he was the one that actually got the whole ball rolling on the Intellivision project.
And all the graphics had to be done at the beginning. They were done on pixel paper, which is kind of like graph paper, and we sent it out to have it done. I mean, the box was being done now. It's just amazing, the changes. My lifetime.
So what was your favorite Intellivision game?
Probably Utopia and Burger Time, because I had to play Burger Time 5 hours a day to get to the top level, so I couldn't do it.
And what would you like to have done at Intellivision that you didn't get a chance to do?
There were 2 games that I designed that never got made. The one was Shower to Shower, and the other was Cities in Flight that I did graphics. Well, I designed it with graphics already. It never, unfortunately, made it.
Can you tell about what the games were kind of like?
Shower to Shower was somebody in the shower washing their hair, and the phone would ring, and they'd have to wrap a towel around, get out, and before they had to get done with the phone, or somebody be at the door, and the mold monsters would be coming out, so they had to put cotton on. They had to go in and out of the shower fast, or the whole house would be taken over.
I'd just like to mention that when I was at Activision, I was working on a game which totally, after I left Mattel, I was working on a game called Termite, which involved the homeowner who would have termites and fires, and he would run from one part of the house to another. So never heard that you must have been house hunting.
No, I did buy a house later. No,
Or at least a homeowner. No.
I came up with it.
So Karen, are you playing any games now?
I spend most of my time, because I teach Maya at Pasadena City College, so I spend most of my time just on the computers doing Maya, which is 3D animation software. So I'm building things. So I spend more time doing that. But since I was just playing Burger Time and how bad I was, next year I'm going to be practicing. I won't look like an idiot.
Yeah, somebody, I don't know if he's here, I don't see him here, scored 199,000 points on Burger Time yesterday.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome.
Amazing.
Was that? Yeah, on television.
Hopefully I'll get up
No, it
there.
was
Pretty spectacular.
It wasn't any of us, though.
Well, Bill, though, had the high score for a while.
Yeah, for a little while.
For a little while.
I've got the high score right now on the arcade machine in the back, but that won't last the day.
And Karen, looking back, what do you think about now about Intellivision that you didn't realize at the time from Mattel?
Well, really how great of a job and how much fun it really was doing that we were able to be creative. And I worked at Disney for 14 years also, and you'd think that would be real creative, but we were allowed to develop our own stuff really, and it was really a lot of fun.
Mr. Breen, how did you learn about the job?
I had just graduated from University of Oregon, and I was and I was trying to look for the perfect job, and so I was getting newspapers from all over the country and perusing who had big ads, and I was actually born in Torrance. So when I looked at that LA paper and I saw this big ad that Mattel was having going into a hiring cycle, I said, I know where they're at. I'd love to work for that company. So I focused all my energy and I started calling Sohl like daily. And they invited me down from Oregon to interview. The rest is...
Just a little context there. People who grew up in Southern California as you would drive up the 405, up or down the 405 freeway, Mattel had this 6-story building just off the 405 freeway at Rosecrans in Hawthorne, California, which is north of Torrance. That was the big Mattel building. It said "Home of Barbie" on it. And I think several of us who grew up in Southern California, it's like you're 6, 7, 8 years old, and you're driving by and saying, "Wow, that's where they make the toys." And then that's where we wound up later. So, and Sybil, he refers to as Sybil Shantz. She was in charge of the personnel department of Mattel Electronics. And she's the one that we initially all went and sat in her office and filled out applications and everything. So, anyway, so Mike, what's your favorite Intellivision game?
There's a few of them. Because I did Buzz Bombers, this is probably the one I played the most. My favorites that I didn't work on were probably Snafu and Dungeons and Dragons, the first Dungeons and Dragons.
I remember on Buzz Bombers, the music in the background is "Flight of the Bumblebee."
My idea.
His idea. Bill Goodrich did the arrangement of it, and when the game was getting near for release, marketing came and said, "Do we have the rights to that?"
I said, he's been dead for 76 years.
And we actually had to fill out something that the composer's been dead about 100 years, so yeah, it's public domain, yes. So Mike, what would you have liked to have done at Intellivision or on the Intellivision? Any projects, any arcade games or something you would like to have worked on?
I just loved working at the company, and we got to do something new every day. We'd have like coding competitions and figuring out who can write this piece of code in the fewest decals. I was towards the end for Intellivision 3, I was working on what was going to end up being the graphics engine, and I just like working on the algorithms and making code as efficient as possible. I don't think I was ever really into game design, but I really liked working on the box and having everything I did appear on the screen.
Just one side thing that's on here. Could you also talk about the marketing thing that that Mattel tried to do with Buzz Bombers?
I don't know, maybe Don would be.
Well, Don, do you remember that part too?
I didn't know which story you did.
Well, they try. See, every now and then, but at one point they started saying, "Gee, we could do some product placement here." So they actually did a version and showed Johnson & Johnson a version of Buzz Bomber with a Raid can going back and forth, which I don't think they were impressed with the idea of Raid. And
Now what would you pay?
So Mike, are you playing any games today? Are you still gaming at all? Seen anything you like?
Well, today I'm a poker player, so most of my gaming endeavors these days revolve around casino and poker.
Mike lives here in Las Vegas, North Las Vegas. So yes, he was at the Venetian the other night. So looking back, anything about that you realize now about Mattel that you maybe didn't realize then?
No, I think then I recognized then that it was like the coolest job I could ever have. I got up every day and was actually anxious to go to work. It was fun.
And in those days, you could sit in your cubicle, work on your computer, and smoke too, right?
Yes, I could. But it's hard on relationships because I would typically be at work until 10, 11 o'clock at night because I was having such a good time. And if you get tired, you go take a break in the arcade room and you play. And then go back to your office and program. It was just one of the best jobs I've ever had, just in terms of sheer joy of going to work.
Bill? Is Bill Fisher?
Yeah, okay.
Here?
So,
Present?
I found out about the job by going to the posting board at UCLA. I was in college, I was just about to graduate, I went to the job board, everybody does. Back then, it wasn't even the newspaper for me, it was little 3x5 cards on a board with little thumbprints in them, and I saw that listing, and I also applied at Hughes and TRW, and interviewed at all 3 places. I got offers from TRW and from Mattel. And when I interviewed, I actually brought this electronic thing that I had built I think they thought that was completely insane. I built this little handheld digital time tester thing, complete with batteries and 2 circuit boards that I hand etched myself, and little fold over thing that connected the two, and insulation between them, and LED displays and the whole bit. So I was a complete turbo nerd already.
Yeah, what can we say? He's a geek.
Yeah, I was geeky before it was cool. Hey, I can dream, can't I? But no, seriously, it was a lot of fun. I went there because I looked at it and I said 2 jobs. I could go into aerospace, or I could do games, and if it didn't work out, I could always get a real job. And never did.
Wasn't your dad one who was questioning your decision on that?
I don't even remember that. I'm sure everybody questioned it. I mean, everybody I know was like, well, you're going to do what? This video game? I don't understand. Nobody knew what we did. I mean, seriously, nowadays you go to E3 and there's 80 bajillion people and they're all like, oh, dude, I want to be a video game programmer. It's the greatest job in the world. Back then it was like, what, are you high? I mean, it was really, nobody even understood it.
Well, and of course now you go to college to get a degree in video game design.
But anyway,
that was like a ridiculous idea back then.
For reference, when we all first got our jobs, the only video game the mass public knew about was Pong. It was the only one that was in bars or that you ever heard about. There was a few others, but we were right at the beginning of the video game.
Yeah, very.
So, Bill, what is your favorite Intellivision game?
My favorite Intellivision game was Tron Deadly Discs. I just loved the gameplay on that. It was so interesting and so unique. And that's one of the things that was my big favorite about working in that era, is that every game was completely new, completely unique. Nobody had ever seen anything like it. Well, not everything, but a lot of it was. I mean, it says the guy who did Not Asteroids, right? But seriously, there was so much stuff going on creatively in our business and in our offices. And Deadly Discs, if you haven't seen it, you ought to take a look at it, just because it's basically taken from Tron the movie. You throw these little disc things, and then you can use it as a shield. And there's all these guys running around, and you could use both hand controllers. So you use one to move and the other to fire. And so you're running, it was just a really interesting gameplay mechanic. I had a great time playing it.
And let's give credit to Mr. Steve Sense, the man who actually designed and programmed the game.
And who learned about the job and managed to get into the department because he fished one of our programming manuals out of the trash can and read it and begged to be brought into the department.
Nice.
Kill him or hire him.
Bill, what would you have liked to have done? What game would you have liked to have done? Maybe an arcade game or just something of your own idea?
Actually, the one I wanted to get done and get released was Party Line, which is the one that we all did. Little known thing, because how much have we talked about Party Line? You've got it in Intellivision Lives, right?
Right, yeah. This crowd, again, the PC Junior crowd probably knows what Party Line games were. Are you familiar with that? Have you read about that on the website? Or seen the interviews with it?
Okay, well, not everybody has it. We did a whole series of games called the Party Line, where it was basically games you would play at a party. And the whole principle of the thing was simple-minded games that you could play in a group, and preferably ones whose controls would not be seriously impeded if you were seriously intoxicated. And we had a little one where you fly a spaceship around and shoot at things, and you had one where you drop little darts on balloons that are rising, and so forth. And they were very, very simple games. It was a lot of fun. We actually pitched it to the senior management of Mattel by walking into their senior management meeting with Punch and Cookies, which was a lot of fun. I mean, we just literally wheeled this card in with Punch and Cookies. Would you like to punch, Josh? Would you like to? Yeah. Very disarming. They didn't quite know what to make of us, but they figured we were the weirdos over in the creative department, and they approved the project. This was shortly before Mattel closed down, so we didn't have a chance to get it to market. I would love to see those come to light.
Yeah, because they were...
All the three that we did do, Blowout, Hard Hat, and Space Cadet, are all on the Intellivision DS version that will be coming out in September. Plug. So you'll have a chance. They're all on the GameCube version also, and I think that, I don't think Blowout is. I think this is the first time that all three of them have been on any, Blowout may have never been seen before, now that I think of it. Okay, Bill. Still playing games? Other than Burger Time and getting the high score?
Yeah, aside from Burger Time, I'll mention one thing about Burger Time because that was kind of fun. I mean, having a Burger Time machine in the office was awesome. The biggest problem is that I and a couple of the other people were seriously hooked on that game. We did get to the point where, unfortunately, I can't do it anymore. The score I got in the back there was only 119,000. We used to routinely get over 1 million points on Burger Time. And because we figured out patterns on every one of the levels, we could drop all the guys on every bun, on every level, just about. Not quite, but it was to the point where it became ludicrous, and we actually wrapped around the score counter on it. What I'm playing now is my wife and I just finished playing through Rock Band, and are looking forward to getting Rock Band 2 and working through that. I try not to play too many games. I deliberately have not gotten into World of Warcraft because I know I would never come up again. and I do have a job and a life to have. But that's what I'm playing right now. That was a lot of fun. I really had a great time with Rock Band. It's an awesome
Yeah. And by the way, his job now is he's the president of a game development company. So yeah. So you're still.
Well, yeah, there's that too. I mean, you do games for a living.
You're playing video games all day anyway.
The other games I play are the ones that we make.
And looking back at Mattel, what do you realize now you didn't realize that about the job?
Well, I think the other folks have really said it. I mean, it is one of those cases where it was the greatest job in the world and you couldn't believe you did it. I mean, where else are you going to be right out of college? I mean, I was a year out of college and my boss walks up to me and says, "Hey, Bill, interested in going to Taiwan?" I said, "Why?" He says, "Well, if you're not interested, I can always get somebody else." I said, "No, I'm interested. Just tell me what the deal is." He says, "Well, we're starting up a company in Taipei to do Apple II and IBM PC programming, and I'd like you to go out there and hire the staff and train them, and spend the summer in Taiwan." I'm like, "Are you sure? Okay, dude, rock on." So, here I was, 25 years old and flying to Taiwan and training a whole staff of programs, hiring Chinese programmers to do Apple II, and they had no idea what was going on. I mean, it was huge culture shock. And so, where else are you going to have an experience like that? It's a once-in-a-lifetime kind of thing, and it was a blast. And, so we got to do stuff like that. And then the other guys are right, too, that the environment there was very fluid and very free, and it wasn't like most jobs. And so what I did actually is once we left there, Mike and Steve and I started a company. And I've perpetuated that same kind of feeling. It's interesting because when people walk into our office, all they do is they walk into the lobby. I mean, they don't even walk around the office. They walk in and say, "Wow, this must be a really cool place to work. I'd like to work here." And it's because I've kept that same vibe. It's the only job I've ever had. So I'm trying to keep that same vibe, a very open, fluid kind of working environment where people are respected for what they do and they can do great things. They can screw around sometimes and come up with great ideas. And management doesn't tell them to shove it because we weren't planning on doing that. I certainly hope that that's what's going to come out of this largely. But that was the thing that was great about Mattel, is that you just felt so enthusiastic about being there. It was like, wow, we're doing stuff that nobody's ever done before. And we're doing things that we just enjoy. So you go there every day and you're, wow, this is a really cool challenge. I'm going to beat this thing. So.
Dave Warhol, how did you learn about the job?
Let's see, I learned about the job. I went to Pomona College, got a degree in music, theory and composition, and then I got a job with the college for a year in their computer center. And during that year, I got a message from a guy named Daglow, who also went to Pomona College, and he had asked the computer center to post on their bulletin board, "Hey, we're hiring at Mattel." And I went, "Posted on the bulletin board? Forget it. I'm going to respond to this myself." So we did post it as well, and Eddie Dombrauer, who's also another classmate of ours, heard about the position and joined up. So I went in and did the interviews, and first I interviewed with Mike, and he had a technical quiz for me that I probably barely passed, and then I had another interview with Don, and he said, "Well, you had to talk to Mike first because of the home court advantage or whatever." And then my last interview was with Gabriel, and for 5 minutes we talked about my qualifications, 10 minutes we talked about what it was like to work at Mattel, and for a half hour we talked about the symphony in Europe from 1920 to 1950 or something like that. That kind of told me that they were trying to bring in people with diverse backgrounds and interests into the mix there.
And your favorite Intellivision game, and why?
Well, like Mike, I guess I got a lot of favorites. I like to play deadly discs. That's just a lot of finesse with the two-hand controllers and all that. But a lot of the later INTV Corporation games I like for the gameplay, but also because, being on the inside of them, there were tricks that we were doing that I was really proud of. Hoverforce had a little enemy helicopter AI interpreter language where we could script up different ways that the enemies behaved, and we crammed 99 holes of golf into the Super Pro golf, and Body Slam I loved, just coming up with inside jokes for the characters' names and things like that. So there's a ton of them that a lot of pride in.
What was you're talking about the helicopter, what was the one helicopter you really liked?
All right, Hoverforce is this big city, the metropolitan area, and the helicopters are flying around blowing up the city. You have to kind of figure out how they're moving and anticipate them and get them. And one of the, probably 18 different helicopter styles, and one of them was called I Hate Hoops. And all it did was fly around the city looking for basketball courts, and as soon as it found a basketball court, it would just pummel the city. It would go around to the basketball court and hammer that.
Okay, now you produced a lot of games, probably more than anybody else. What were you not able to do? What would you like to have done?
And the waning side of the Intellivision was right when the 8-bit Nintendo was coming up, and so looking back, I would love to do a side-scroller, a Super Mario Brothers thing. At Real Time Associates, we ended up doing probably 24 side-scrollers on different consoles, but we never really had the chance to do one on the Intellivision. I pitched the guys at INTV Corporation a couple of original ideas. One was kind of a Robot Wars kind of game where you try to get into a robot factory that had been gone haywire, run amok, and cranking out all these robots, and that you were trying to break into. But back then, they couldn't sell anything without a license. There weren't really. If you look at console cycles, at the beginning part of the console, it'll have a lot of original software, but at the end of it, it's got a lot of licenses to kind of come through the noise. And so there were a couple of ideas like that I couldn't get off the ground because they were, original.
And you playing games now?
Yeah. I am playing World of Warcraft. I got an 80 Warlock on one of those servers and a few other characters. I keep an eye, because I still have in game development, I do keep an eye on a lot of games. Pick up all the big ones that get, 80 plus. God of War. I've just picked up StarCraft recently. But I'm only half playing them. I play them to enjoy them half the time. The other half, I'm reverse engineering and going, oh, that's interesting what they did with the HUD there, or how do they get that special effect, or I haven't seen that before. So it's always kind of keeping an eye on the competitive product while at the same time just trying to get some fun out of them as well.
You're looking at some of the Facebook games too, aren't you?
What's that?
Did you say you looked at some of the Facebook games?
Oh yeah, Facebook. I may get to do a Facebook game for a company, we'll see. But I'm playing a lot of Frontierville and Social City and Treasure Isle and stuff like that again, trying to just see what the mechanics are there in common and what they're doing.
And looking back at the Mattel, what do you know now about the experience that you didn't realize at the time?
Well, I know I should have a better answer to this because this is a question that I came up with. But I think at the time I recognized how fun and unique it was working there, and how few people had the opportunity to do that. And like Bill, I've tried to take some of those experiences and perpetuate them into my own company. No, I guess I'm kind of figuring out that what I didn't realize at the time, how unique either the technologies or the designs, or we're kind of like working at the subatomic level of game design, and now it's molecules, entire massive constructs made out of all of these little things that we started off with, doing 8 lines of code. It's like, wow, that's the best random number generator I've ever seen. And then now that's just a footnote or an afterthought in somebody else's library with a higher level stuff.
Steve, how did you learn about the job at Mattel?
The way I remember it, I worked at Hughes Aircraft Company on Rose Command, on the other side of the freeway. And one day I was driving to the freeway, getting onto the on-ramp, and looped around right next to the hotel parking lot. And I saw a sign on there was some mention on their little marquee or whatever you call that sign, the things that they had a job. So I think I looked it up in the paper, and it said 1 to 3 years of microprocessor experience. And I had 6 years of experience where I did Fortran defense work. And so I didn't really quite fit their thing, but I took my resume out and I crossed out the top secret clearance and wrote my 104 games. And sent it in, and after about 3 weeks of talking to Sohl, she finally got me an interview. And Mike gave me the test that Dave was talking about, and conveniently it was basically some 16-10 assembly language stuff to figure out if it was a inclusive war or something that wasn't built into the processor. And but the process was very much like I've been doing some PDP-11 assembly language a little bit, and the processor was practically PDP-11. So they're looking for people with 6502 or Z80 experience to write on this PDP-11 processor. So I could handle that pretty well. Mike said he was worried about being able to give me a second interview because I cost too much since I had 6 years of experience. And he didn't give me a second interview. So I got an offer instead of a second interview.
But now you see, like you say, you had a secret clearance, you had all this experience, you were overqualified for this. Why were you saying, I want that job?
Well, because I had 104 games.
You had 100 board games.
And that was the other thing. There was the guys at Hughes, and I went over to Mattel for no raise, like 2 months before I would get a raise. And they said, well, why? He said programming is programming. And I said, well, what about COBOL programming? So then they said, well, they agreed that there could be worse programming. but they didn't understand that there could be better programming.
Well, I forget who, because a lot of the people who were at Mattel came from aerospace. I forget who it was, whether it was you or Russ Haft or somebody said that the one thing they didn't like about the job they were doing, they've been working on like missile guidance stuff or defense things. They said the only way they would ever know whether or not their programming really worked was if World War III started. And they wanted to do something where they could actually see their work being enjoyed without World War III starting. So.
Yeah, so I was working on NSA stuff, so it's like, except for like PP games.
Mm-hmm. Right. So what was your favorite in television
My
game?
favorite television game, I think, at least now, is probably still Night Stalker, which I use the two-hand controller trick on Night Stalker as well, so that you can shoot and run at the same time. Which again, is one-hand controller, because of the way they're wired. And that's the game I'm most likely to play, or after Smash I play a lot as well. And I don't just play Space Bar Chickies and the Bomber very often anymore.
But you still like those games, right?
I still think
That's good. And what would you have liked to have done at television?
And well, the first thing I thought when I mentioned it, and actually Ryan made up this question and Dave asked me for an example, one of the ones I mentioned was that I would have liked, that when Bill and I had their arcades on Hubert, we said, oh, this would be great for the television, of course somebody else did do it, so I don't feel quite as bad about not having done it. Someone passed on the offerings of that. I guess they didn't really see Hubert as much, but that publisher. But the other games that I would have liked to have done were probably 3 games that I wish I or someone had done for the television would be Missile Command, Ripoff, and Penguin. Missile Command is the game that I said I wanted to do when I did the Atari.
You interviewed Atari also, right?
Yeah, I did the Atari after.
Right.
When they started doing television games, and they were stealing.
Right.
When we had the Kool-Aid Man game come out, there was a competition of people submitting their designs, and I submitted a design that was pretty much based on ripoff. But after the competition, they said, "Oh well, one of the rules is the Kool-Aid Man can't lose any liquid." And it's like, well, you should have told us that at the beginning of the competition, because my entire thing was people were trying to drain the thing.
And Steve, looking back, what do you realize now about your experience at Mattel that you didn't realize at the time?
Well, I've been, ever since Dave warned me for the questions, I was, what? And I guess the biggest thing that I didn't realize then was that 25 years later, when you stand up here, that even that so many people still care about it. So it's not.
You still care, don't you? Mr. Don Daglow. Mr. Daglow, how did you first learn about Mattel was doing video games?
I was driving down the freeway in a convertible with the top down, and a voice spake unto me, and the voice said, "Would you like to work in the exciting world of video games?" And I had been a mainframe game programmer as a hobbyist for 9 years, but had never professionally worked on games. And I didn't know what to do, so I kind of looked up at God and said, yes, I'd love to do it. Would you like to shape the future of the electronic games industry, this new emerging creative field? Yes, Lord, I would like to do that. I swear, it was a radio ad. In that case, call 213-978-JOBS. 213, that was the number. When something changes your life in a moment, you remember. And Sybil had not come yet. I got a guy named Eric Beekman who gave me a chance because I was not a professional programmer. I'd had a chance to go work for Hughes 2 years before doing game design of simulations for submarine crews, and had elected not to leave my job teaching because I was still trying to be a professional writer. And so, but Eric, even though I didn't have a CS degree, I was all from the hacker tradition, never a computer class in my life. I had taught programming classes informally, but I had never taken one. Eric gave me that chance. Gabriel had not started yet, so Richard Chang interviewed me and they gave me the offer off of that, but it was off that radio.
Great. And again, the context, we talked about Richard Chang earlier. Gabriel Baum, I don't think we've talked about yet, he was hired to run the application software department, which was the Intellivision programming department. And he actually began the same day you did, right? I think his story is that, go ahead.
I'll state this judiciously. We met in the men's restroom during our physicals for our first day at Mattel. That's how I met my boss.
What was your favorite Intellivision game? I bet he says Utopia. And why?
Actually, my favorite, Utopia was a labor of love. But my two favorites were Burger Time, which I think was executed brilliantly under tremendous amount of pressure.
Ray Kessner.
And my second favorite, which was actually the macho competition between us, is inside Triple Action. There's the biplanes game. If we were taking a 5 or 10 minute break, we would wander down to the end of the row of cubes where there'd be a station, and we'd play each other in biplanes, because it was saying you could play fast. And everybody got to where it's a tiny game, it's very simple, but there are all these different nuances of the way the physics work. And everybody got very good, and then using the wraparound on the screen. And people got good at having their planes float
Float down from the
really
top,
quickly,
up the top, float
horizontally, all
down,
these different
spin
things.
backwards and shoot backwards.
And it became the ultimate, I am tougher than you. You can come and try and take me on in 5 minutes, but you won't never defeat me. So that became the macho. There was the formal order of the place as managers, but there was the real order of priority of the company, which was largely based on violence.
What would you have liked to do on Intellivision that you never had a chance to do?
I would like to have kept going, because I think I've had the chance to lead teams all the way up to PS3 and Xbox 360 and everything in between. And if I could have the chance to take these guys, God, I'm not sure this.
I know, you're tearing up. I can hear you jerking up.
If I could have gone forward working with these people, with Mike Minkoff there, who is not here today, but Mike Minkoff, a fabulous human being, a fabulous program. If this group could have gone forward, we could have conquered the world. These people were so good, they remain so good today, but we have a hell of a team. And I respect Steve Cartwright, Gary Kitchen, David Crane, all the guys from Atari and Activision were here tremendously. They've become friends for years. But these guys, we could have gotten going. We could have done many, many more things. But just
Are you playing any games now?
yeah, these days I have a plan on working with on a Connect project, so I'm involved in a lot of gestural interface stuff, working on some social media projects. So that drives some, and then just going back and playing some of the high-end games. StarCraft is now burning a hole in my expectations. It's my next target.
And looking back, anything about the experience of Mattel that you didn't realize then that you realize now?
Actually, the perspective I have is I think about how much I thought I knew at age 30 in the role I had. And there were a lot of things, obviously, I think I had right, but it just kind of, I look back and I think, oh kid, you had so much to learn and you were so full of yourself. I think that's the biggest thing I think about what I didn't know then.
Now I got to go through these things myself.
Don asked him a question.
You're not asking.
Keith, tell me, how did you learn about the exciting opportunity at Mattel Electronics?
What's going to be scary about this is I'm realizing now how much I'm like Don. Because yes, exactly.
Last question.
Oh, that's, well, no, yeah, okay. I'm just asking the last one first. No,
Before you go on, one of the formats we were thinking about was doing a celebrity roast of Don Daglow. And after a while, I was going, well, no, a celebrity roast of Keith Robinson. So maybe next year, that's...
I think it would be the same thing. Because exactly the same way. I was driving along and I heard the radio ad for the job fair at Mattel. So, same thing. The voice of God coming down. And favorite Intellivision game and why? Biplanes. I'm not one who really likes playing games, solitary things. I like the whole, biplanes, it's so simple. It's not like, baseball, football, we have the rules and everything. It's just kind of like, you're playing this game and trash talking the whole time. It's just tremendously fun. It's so simple that you don't get caught up in all the rules. You just get in there and battle on it. So I think biplane from the simplest games. It can't be more than 2K code. And it's just, the stalling, everything is brilliant. It's brilliant to watch a good game be played. We actually have that posted on YouTube. There was a guy named Steve Montero, he did Night Stalker, and on his final day, he and Russ Haft, who did Tron Mazatron, they were really I think the top players, excuse me, I'm sure that other heroes are along in their league, but Steve Montero and Russ Haft were just fantastic. And on Steve's final day, we actually hooked up an old VCR unit and we taped a final best of 7 games battle between the two of them, and it is spectacular. And search it out on YouTube, because it's just a screen, and we put a live mic on it so you can hear us in the background all talking about it, making the comments. And it sounds like, oh, that's got to be pretty dull, 10 minutes of watching a couple guys play blind. I love the whole thing. It's just spectacular watching some of the gameplay. Let's see, what would I like to have done on Intellivision? One thing was actually, I think Steve was involved with this, Bill was involved with this. When ColecoVision came out, they had the rights to Donkey Kong. And they also, at the same time, released Donkey Kong on Intellivision and Atari. And the version for Intellivision was so bad that we actually suspected, and we're giving you too much credit, but I suspected that we suspected that they had deliberately done it badly to kind of show that the Intellivision was a terrible machine. And we were saying, boy, wouldn't that be great to do it ourselves, not for sale, but just to send around to reviewers' magazines to show, if you know what you're doing, you can really do a good game. And so that's what I wish we could have done it. I wish we could have done Donkey Kong for Intellivision, just to show that we knew how to really make it work. And Gabriel said, why don't you instead program something we can sell? So never had a chance to do that one. Playing games now, I really don't, other than our own, just to test them out. I still get caught up in them. I still get, well, let's see if this Astro Smash is working, and then, half an hour later, it's like, oh, gee, I wish it had half an hour. But I still love our own games, but I really haven't had a chance to look at the new games. Probably, although I do want to play the new Tron stuff. Tron is stuff, because I did Tron Solar Sailor, that's still near and dear to my heart, is the movie Tron and everything, and Tron Legacy coming out. I got somebody at Disney to get me into the press conference at Comic-Con last week, so I'm so excited. Tron. And looking back, it's kind of the same thing that Don was saying. Jeez. Yeah, I was 26, 27 at the time, and I knew everything in the world. You kind of realize that now you're 54 going, hey, wait, I didn't know everything. I don't know everything in the world now. So that's kind of it, I think. We were going to also do some other questions, but I think that we should open it up for the floor now. So, Bill, you have something to say?
I have one little tiny fun question because of something that Don said. Don, you said you were programming mainframe games. Let me ask in this room, how many of us have written a game on punch cards? Oh yeah.
How many people know? How many people have seen a punch card? How many people know the technical name for a punch card? Yes? Yes, there you go. And why is a hollow earth card the size it is?
Outside of
large size note.
Yes, the dollar bill used to be that size before the 1930s, and he put that said make it that size. Okay, so there's very history. Okay, who's got a question? For anybody in the panel? Yes.
Just curious what you guys think about some of the homebrew games that are being done now, like Space Control, or there's a few other ones. Have you seen any of these for the Intellivision?
Yeah, I'm a little disappointed. We were hoping when things started to come out that we'd see some original stuff, and I'm a little bit more disappointed that it's just kind of translations of existing games. We'd like to see, and I understand people want to, play with emulators and do all that, but I'd really like to see some new games. Actually, we're trying to figure this out. One of our programmers, Dave Akers, is in Japan, and he just literally this morning emailed me a file, said, "Oh, I programmed a new Intellivision game. What do you think?" And we're trying to get it up and running on one of our emulators so we can look at it. But he did a new game, so maybe there's a new game coming out for an Intellivision.
But I think the homebrew stuff is great, and for people to actually figure out what it was like to program in that, I think that any of that stuff, it almost inspires me to go back and want to write another Intellivision game.
Yeah, to finish my point on the fact that a little disappointing that's only other games like that is that we have legal problems. We can't really fully release them. It'd be nice if people were doing original stuff and you could work with them and get some new stuff out there. But if people are just doing translations of games that they don't have the right to, it's a fun exercise for them. It's kind of exciting to see, oh, they did a really great translation. This is really nice, but what can we do with it? So let's see some creativity out there. This goes back to what Don was saying. The group that we had was not really a technical group because Mattel wasn't willing to pay the money for top-rate programmers. Steve had to come over at same salary, slightly less salary. Same salary he came over with?
Approximately no days, and right before us.
But most of the programmers who came to Mattel were people like Andy Sells, who had been a piano bar at Tony Roma's in Santa Monica, who, because his wife had gotten pregnant, he thought, gee, I should learn to do something that actually would pay. And a friend recommended he go to, one of these, nighttime computer schools, learning center type of thing. And we had a lot of people like that, people who were lawyers and dancers and musicians and everything. So they weren't the top programmers in just technicality. They were all good and talented, but we came up with a group that was very creative, and I think that's why the group is so strong.
In fact, Eddie Dombrauer is a great, you mentioned dancer. Eddie Dombrauer, who I did World Leader Baseball with later, phenomenally talented guy, very solid programmer, but also he had the vision. He had invented the world's first computerized dance notation system before he came to Mattel and then on the Apple II. It was that ability to have a vision for something and then make it happen through technology. That was something you saw, I think, consistently, and that's just one great example.
I want to mention David Stifel, who's a trained actor. He studied at Yale School of Drama, where he was often paired up with Sigourney Weaver for the exercises because they were both very tall.
Other questions? Yes?
Yeah, you talked about how crappy Donkey Kong was. Was there any third-party games that you liked and then it made you kind of want to improve your own craft?
Dreadnought Factor.
Yeah, Dreadnought Factor. I actually made a hacked version of Dreadnought Factor when I was at Mattel because I was too impatient to go through the boring first levels. So I actually hacked a ROM and burned it into ROM and then worked around the menus and put it in a menu that would allow you to jump to any advanced level right away.
I would say one distinction here is we kind of make a blue sky ranger distinction, is that in some of these cases like with Activision and iMagic, their television programmers kind of started out either APH or at Mattel. So they're kind of like, so the Activision and iMagic games I kind of included Blue Sky Ranger game, whereas Coleco and Sega were not. No one from Mattel, so they were less experienced. So I think a lot of the Activision iMagic games, there's a total of 21, 7 of the one working together, I think are all great, because they're all arcade-style games, and they're very fun. And very
The Parker Brothers games are well done. I think Coleco was the company that had the most incentive to not do a good job at the television. because their system was comparable to the television in lots of ways. And so they had the most incentive to not make the television look a little worse. Even Atari was actually we'll see some television programmers anyway who get up their television games. But it was clear that the television could do stuff that 2600 couldn't, and so they didn't really have as much incentive to do a bad job at the television crew.
So maybe in 30 days, Microsoft will announce games for PS3.
Yeah, I think that, there's a lot of games that we did like on those, but a lot of them were, like I say, games that were done by companies that sort of had a relation to, they learned their craft from
Part of the tree.
yeah, so, but yeah, the iMagic and stuff and the Activision games I think are very good. I love Bean Wiper. That was done by David Warhol, who did Major League Baseball and did Poker and Blackjack and created the operating system for the television. And then he went to Activision with Bean Wiper.
Did you kind of feel pressure though to improve your own material after playing those, or kind of?
I was kind of amazed we would actually sit down and play for an hour or two and reverse engineer or say, how did they get the scroll to go this fast? Or look at how they're reusing the sprite for that. So there was, and somebody would often grab me and pull me into a room to do something like that because I'd just be sitting there coding. And it's one of those things about the job was so much fun because you're playing and reverse engineering.
Yeah, actually, the biggest thing for me was that a lot of the games that came out after ours, they started doing them 60 hertz. The Intellivision exec ran at 20 cycles per second, so it had a 3-tick circle to it as it was working because the CPU was so slow, you just couldn't do everything in one tick that you needed to do. And a lot of those folks had figured out ways of doing games that were full 60 hertz, which we thought was very impressive, and it was much smoother and felt more like the Atari games, because Atari, by definition, you were going to the scan lines on the screen and you had to do everything at 60 hertz. So that was one of the things that I found most interesting. And I think, is it correct that most of the other games, the public games, the games that were done outside of Mattel, didn't use the exec?
Well, yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
because there were various reasons why they didn't want to touch the code that was in our ROMs. And so they ended up having to write a whole bunch of new stuff that, did things in a different way anyhow. And that's one of the reasons why theirs were a bit very different looking.
Right.
Well, the main thing there is that if you hired somebody who had worked at Mattel, you didn't want them to take advantage of that. So, like when the Atari guys that were all taken from, or mostly taken from Intellivision, Russ Half and others, they created their own operating system, which they actually called the MCP from Tron, and used that. So they created their own separate operating system. And that was funny also because when David Rolfe left APH and was working for Activision, he had to pretend he didn't know how the exec worked when he's the one who wrote it. So that's kind of ironic. The thing is though, not so much, for me at least, it wasn't so much third-party games. There was a little bit, not really a rivalry, but I guess it was kind of a gee, here's what we can do, is there was the outside company APH that was in Pasadena, and they had done the original games, but they were still doing games while we were doing games. So it was more seeing what those guys had done, like Tom Lowry, who did Dungeons and Dragons and did Treasure of Tarman. You see, Treasure of Tarman was one that I just went, wow, you can do that on a television? That's pretty spectacular. So it wasn't so much the third party, it was the guys over at APH that was, to me, more kind of the competition.
I think part of it too is there was a momentum we had. There were a lot of things, when everything went to hell, there were a lot of things we had going, which, though they had a chance to keep going, would have then borne fruit that would have been our stake in the sand of looking to those other guys and saying, okay guys, stop that. But of course everything fell apart, so we didn't have a chance to do that.
Is that a quick, okay?
Kind of what you guys were just talking about, Atari and Intellivision. some of the best games that I saw in the 2600 were the M-Network games. And some of you guys may have worked on them, but tell us how that came about and how you guys made these games for the 2600 that was so much better than what Atari was doing.
Yeah, I remember when Star Strike came out that had been programmed by Dave Akers, I mentioned earlier. There was actually a review saying, why does Mattel save their best work for the 2600 games? Which personally I would disagree with. I prefer Astro Smash, John's original version, to Astro Blast, which is our translation on the 2600. But yeah, because a lot of the games, the same game, Dungeon, Night Stalker and everything. But the way it came about was actually because, I was telling a story earlier, when APH made the original contract to do games for Mattel, they didn't put in anything about royalties. And so suddenly they're doing these games for like $27,000 for Intellivision, and they're seeing it sell 1 million copies, and they went, hey, we made a mistake there. We should have gotten some royalties. So they got this idea that they could do 2600 games for Mattel also. So they went and figured out how to do that, and then came to Mattel and said, look, we've got all these 2600 games now, and but we want royalties this time. And they actually went through a big subterfuge because they were afraid that Mattel would say, no, the contract we have with you covers all games. So they actually laid off their top people, and they had they developed a third-party guy came and said, I figured this out. Was that? Yeah, they were doing all this. Anyway, they finally brought it about. So it actually came about because APH wanted royalties on the games, and they couldn't get them off the Intellivision ones, so they wanted to do the 2600 ones. So that's how it came about. And so initially, their top people were working on those games.
In fact, there's a whole pattern that we had in the last year. That instead of all being on the television, we started to fractionalize, aiming at different things. So like Dave Akers and some of the programmers looking at 2600. Bill going to Taiwan, Keith led another team. We had the people who were working on the advanced Mattel platform that never shipped, working on secret projects there.
And I was working on Advent Universe completely.
Right.
So about 90% done. Show it's DS.
But see, I disagree that the best stuff was done on the 2600. With the example being Burger Time.
No. The best Atari game, the games before the 2600 were made by Atari or among the best.
Oh, the Atari games, right. Well, yeah, see, this is actually something that, every now and then I'll see somebody talk about the baseball games, for example. And they'll say, well, yeah, in the commercials, they always, compare the television to the worst of the Atari baseball games, but the Atari did some good ones. Well, that's because we helped raise the standard there. Yes, their first game was bad, but then we did an Atari baseball game that was really good. In fact, David Rolfe, again, he did that one. And so then they did their Real Sports one, which they kind of learned from us how to make it, how to do it better. But they didn't have an incentive until there was this real competition coming about. So, and I know that when Eric Del Sesto was one of our guys, and he was working on stuff, he discovered how to eliminate, there's kind of these random black lines on the left. He discovered how to get rid of those by timing it just right so it made it look like a border. And also was the thing is that our marketing department, with our Intellivision games, because of the way the has a video processor inside, moving objects don't flicker. But on Atari, moving objects will flicker as you reposition them on the screen and everything. So our marketing department said, we want to be the company where the games don't flicker. So they wanted the same standard of the Intellivision games on the Atari. So there was a little bit more also of a kind of a marketing rule that flicker had to be minimized. So that was kind of a rule that just came down.
But one comment for context. Remember, we're talking about different companies, all with very large teams. On any of our companies, if you point to any one title, you can find some titles where something lagged. The top programmers on each of these teams were world-class programmers, and there is a universal pattern of respect for people. So yes, on one particular game you might find something that shines in some way, But I think one of the things that long term, I know I certainly feel and I believe reflects what we've all said here is, by and large, the top programmers of the other teams were outstanding people we admired very greatly.
I still feel very badly at one of these things. I was interviewed. One second. One second. I'll get you. I was just going to say that I feel very badly at one of these things a few years ago. They were asking me about, well, why did the gaming industry crash back then? Oh, you had a lot of bad games, and I singled out the ET game. So, oh, the ET game, that really did bad. And then they cut directly from me to the guy who programmed it. He said, well, we finished it on time. I mean, we had 3 weeks and we made a game. I would challenge anybody else. I feel so bad that I didn't mean to actually, like, boom, slam that guy and blame the whole thing on him. But, yes.
One thing I wanted to mention was that Intellivision was always number 2. Atari was number 1. And we were always trying to do better than other people. I don't know if Atari people thought that they were number 1, they didn't have to work very hard, or whether it was management issues that I've heard about. But in television, internally, we were very focused on doing the best games we could. And there was the marketing department had their input, of course, but we were a little like Avis. We always had to do better than number 1. So if Atari came out with a game and we came out with a similar one, ours would be better. Would look better, play better, had to be better. So I think that sense helped us in the fact that we were not dominant in these. And also, we were a little bit more upscale than Atari because our systems were more expensive. So we wanted to deliver, when people paid the extra money, we wanted to deliver really good games.
I would point out also that I believe that Atari and Activision, they hired more of our people away. I think that, I don't know how many, who did we ever hire from one of their companies? They rated us, we didn't rate them. Including right from John Sohl, who was rated from us, but...
I was hired, maybe the first person.
In the Breen.
I was hired by Activision, hired away from Mattel. At least a half a dozen people came, they didn't come with me, but after a year later, there were half a dozen Intellivision people who moved to Northern California. So I guess the design and development department was an incubator for game designers.
You bet, they wanted us.
Was hiring good
We were the best.
I got an offer, I didn't go.
I got an offer and I didn't go either.
I didn't get a single offer. Not one. Yes, agreed.
So this question leads right into that. Of course, at Atari, they had the 2 waves of programmers that split the scene and formed their own companies because they wanted recognition and more money.
Right.
And that didn't happen in television. Was that because you guys were unhappy but you liked working there, or was it because you were treated so well that there was no reason to leave?
Well, we did have people leave. I mean, we had a whole group left. Well, not to form their own company exactly, but Russ Haft and the guys who left to form the Atari Soft. I mean, Atari kind of treated that as its own company, and they really gave Russ the kind of chance to be the manager and to really run the company himself. So there was that whole group. I mean, they actually opened it in Santa Monica, so they could just go right up the street as opposed to up in Silicon Valley.
They also promised us bonuses if our games sold better.
But that was for the very end.
Yeah, that was at the end.
At the end. Yeah, it was not a royalty plan, it was a bonus plan.
I used Activision. Gabriel and I and Mike had a lot of meetings where we go say, we've got to get bonuses, we have to get something so the best selling game to get more money for our team. After all, you don't want Activision or iMagic to start successfully raiding here. And it was only after we lost people to Activision and iMagic that we finally, it was after about 3 years, then finally we got this measly little symbolic concession of something.
What games are those?
Names have been boxed out.
This is interesting that when I talk to like Russ Haft now about that, it wasn't that he was ever unhappy with treatment at Mattel. And none of the people I know who left was really unhappy with the treatment. It was, in his case, he just thought that he wanted to work for a smaller company. when he started with Mattel, it was small. The division he was in, the Martin Mattel Electronics division, he was like the 15th programmer hired. I was like the 18th or 20th. Then when we got to 100 programmers, he's just going, well, it's just too big. I like a small company and everything. So that's why I left. It wasn't it wasn't treatment or anything. It was just the whole environment of wanting to be in a little startup company thing, the excitement of when we were first doing stuff in Mattel Electronics. So I think him leaving, it was not anything wrong with Mattel other than the inevitability that as you're doing well, the company gets bigger. And when it just got so big, he just kind of said, well, I like a company that can turn faster and everything. So that's why he left and took some of our top people with him, unfortunately. But yeah, so I don't see, so yeah, I think that there's the fact that you didn't see people splitting off. Now remember, iMagic was started, half the people who started iMagic were people who worked with Mattel. So there was some of that entrepreneurial at the very beginning. Yeah, we can start our own company. But no, I think the environment of Mattel and the treatment of Mattel was very good. It did do a lot for holding on to programmers. And there was, as Don kind of points out, there was sort of that team spirit of when we went to CES and had a booth of real pride of ownership in the games and everything, that we were all part of it. And Mattel, I think, did a good job of making us feel that way. Like, you guys, this is it. Gabriel did that, Mike and Don. So there was another question behind you. Yes.
Yeah, opinion question for everyone. At what point in the development process do you know that a game is good? And what are the top 2 characteristics? Easy questions.
Yeah.
When everybody...
Mr. Sohl?
My game experience of getting shipped games was actually pretty small. I only got 2, and Astro Smash I knew was good early on, and I made it better. B-17 was completely driven by deadlines, and I was exhausted, and I just wanted to get it out. So that my experience is not enough to help, but these other people.
I think when everybody wanted to test it and have fun doing it, when they'd be in a little cubicle and somebody walked by and they'd see how much fun they were having, they go, that's gonna be a good game. That's what I would do.
Yeah, Dave, you have a story in that, right?
Well, yeah, if it's a Mind Strike story, I was working on tuning it and getting people involved and helping out, Mike Breen and Mark Tropicana especially, but walking through the hall, coming back from lunch, and there were some characteristic sound effects I put in there, and I hear these sound effects from my game being played in somebody else's cubicle, and I'm going, wow, what compelled them to actually want to pick up my game and take a break with it? And that, to me, was kind of the sign that, okay, well, I think we're onto something here.
Yeah, contextually, again, when a program would get to a certain point where the game was playable, a memo would go out and say, hey, let's help Dave out and try out his new game, and it's on.
I thought it was because it was fun. I didn't realize it was a memo.
It would just be a memo saying where they could find the game. Saying it's now posted on this server, and we had some of the stations, I think somebody mentioned before, the cubicles, and some of the cubicles were just empty and had a system in there where you could test it. Like I remember when I first started, it was while Night Stalker was going through that testing. And Russell Iblich did the sound effects for that game, and that heartbeat. And when he would walk into our department and hear somebody playing, he goes, oh, turn it up, and run in and turn the volume up to full. And so he was sitting there going, boom, 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 boom. Turn it down. But yeah, so when you heard people playing the games, I guess I would love to have that experience. One tester liked my game, Tron Solar Sailor, and he'd come and say, yeah, Keith, I like that game. I'd say, really? But I never heard anybody playing it there. And Dante was turned into a birthday cake. For his 30th birthday, they made a Utopia birthday cake. So that's, I think, it says, what's a birthday cake? And anybody else have an opinion on that? I care about it when you heard the other people testing it. Okay, anybody else? I know we've gone over time, but you're still here. Yes?
After 27 years.
Oh, that's
a pretty simple question, but technically, how would you play the different games? Well, how would you develop the games? If you wanted to try something out, that someone else wrote and they said it was on the server, how did you get that to your workstation to play it? all the technical aspects of that?
We had a development system called, there was two. One was the Megas board, and that was a parallel system, memory, and it was hooked up to an Intellivision in your cubicle or in the cubicle for testing. And we had these little DEC, or actually Andromeda, time-sharing systems that you would then, it would in parallel load the program into that, and then to your Intellivision you could play it.
There would be like a row of cubicles, and at the end of the row of cubicles was one of these Andromeda systems. And in there would be the ROM emulators and these long cables that would reach down the row of cubicles into your office.
So we didn't have our own computers.
No.
We just had terminals to that.
Right. So we had terminals hooked into the computer at the end of the row, but then the development kits had cables into our office connected to a TV set. And so, I mean, eventually, when I started, there weren't enough of them, and I had to, like, when Bill was out of town, work in his office, or we would just be running around trying to use machines that other people had then, because they were scarce. Eventually, we all had our workstations.
Yes, but then just quickly, later, when they discontinued the original keyboard component, they realized, oh, that'll make a nice development system. So Mattel recalled all of them and then converted them over to be development systems because they had the memory inside. So the only problem with those was they were serial instead of parallel. So you had to wait forever for your game to download into that. But then you'd play it off of the original keyboard component. And so the new people who came in at Mattel were assigned those, which all hook up to a big PDP VAC system. There are actually two of them downstairs. One was called Ken, one was called Barbie. And the later programmers worked on Ken and Barbie to get them.
Yeah, and even in the early days, we didn't have enough of debuggers that were called widgets that we had to use if you were going to actually debug your code. And so you wait for somebody else to go to lunch so you could do it. And when John was trained, he taught me GI 1610 and taught me how to code on the Intellivision. And I got into this habit of having to write everything out longhand, so that once I went in and had a chance to type it in and actually try and test things and see if it would work, you'd be taking advantage of time when you couldn't get to a widget. And then when you got on the widget, you'd be wanting to use that time efficiently because you wanted to get out of the way of the next person.
We were growing so fast in 1982 that the equipment couldn't keep up. And it wasn't just the systems, there was also like telephone lines. I remember one time my boss came to me and said, oh, one of your employees has been making way too many phone calls because he said, look at this. So I had to go to him and say, you're making too many phone calls, it's actually our toll calls and everything, and you're calling the East Coast and others, and look at this.
I think that was on my phone, and I was...
Well, that was, I forget who it was that I just had to tell that to, but then he finally had to say, well, there's three of us sharing this phone line, don't you?
Yeah, because
I said, no, I didn't know three of us were sharing the phone line.
It was Karen's phone, and the actual perpetrator, I had to go talk to in the end. Your perpetrator was innocent, my perpetrator was guilty.
But it was just because we're all sharing stuff, so yeah, so that's another question back here?
Well, I have a very general question about the Intellivision 3. Did any of you work on it? Was there like excitement about it? I like going to my Intellivision.
Now's our chance to clear this up, Don.
Basically, quick intro and let you do the number thing. Intellivision 3, or our advanced box, since the numbers kept changing, we were working on, was
Intellivision 2 for a long time.
Yes. Started out as Intellivision 2, was an Amiga-like device, is the best way I can describe it.
68,000, Motorola 68,000 base processor.
And bit planes, a lot of stuff. I later had Amiga number 8, I think it was, on my desk at Electronic Arts when EA started supporting the Amiga at the very beginning. And I kept looking at it and going, this is like our box.
Yeah, there was a guy named Dave Chandler who was the real kind of, in Mattel, the father of Intellivision. And he was in charge of that project. So he had his own team. It was actually physically in a different building down Rosecrans Boulevard. And I only got to work on it one time because they wanted to show some game screens. And so I was given the manual, I was given the pages only related to the resolution and color palettes that were available because they wanted one of my artists to do a mock-up of what a screen would look like on that system. So that's the only thing. Now one thing, later, I only learned this very, very recently, we kind of figured this out. I talked to some people in design and development, and they had been told that Mattel had intended to do a line of arcade machines. And, oh yeah, we went to some arcade machines. And so they were trained in 68,000 programming because they were told these arcade machines were 68,000. Didn't figure out till later that, no, they were really being secretly trained to work on this new Intellivision. And the thing that Don and I were joking about here is that again, because they kept changing the original television, now this new one was going to be the Intellivision 2, but then they came up with a way to make the chips cheaper by mass production, so that became the Intellivision 2. And so then it became the Intellivision 3, and so everyone talked about this as the Intellivision 3. But then when ColecoVision was coming out, Glenn Hightower over at AP said, you know, if GI would just make a new stick chip, we could still use the 1610 processor, still be compatible with the old games, and have resolution and everything that's better than the ColecoVision. So that became the Intellivision 3. And this Amiga-like thing, the 68000, became the Intellivision 4. Now, in a speech that Don gave a little while ago, a few months ago, to eliminate all this number thing, he just referred to that as Intellivision Next. Yeah, the Intellivision Next, the Intellivision Next is next. Now, that has suddenly become, on the web, that we had a thing called the Intellivision Next. Now, of course, I'm here running the Intellivision site, and people say, oh, what's the Intellivision Next? I see Don Daglow talking about the Intellivision Next. No, it was just a numbering system. He didn't want to get bogged down in all the numbers. Right, Don?
That's right, there is no Intellivision Next. I deny all allegations that it ever existed, and please, I love my family.
Put that on Wikipedia, guys. Anything else? I think we've gone about 50% over our time limit, so I think that's going to have to be it. Does anybody else have anything to say? Come on, last minute comments.
Thanks for coming, Lenny.
Thanks.
By the way, if you haven't noticed, this is the 30th anniversary of the national release. Intellivision was test marketed in Central California in 1979, but the national release was 1980. So this is 30 years of Intellivision. And this is a plug. I got to get the plug in. Right now, you can get it on iPhone, iPad, Microsoft Game Room on your Xbox 360 Live. And the DS version will be released in September.
Yes!